They did not hate me. That would have required noticing I existed. In my family, I was the quiet one. The way wallpaper is quiet, always there. Never discussed. My sister got compliments like confetti. I got questions like, "So, are you still doing that computer thing?" Then one night, I said a single sentence that made the whole room freeze. Suddenly, my family remembered my name the same way people remember a wallet they lost. My name is Grace Wallace. I am 33 years old, and for the vast majority of those years, I have been an extra in a movie starring my younger sister. That is not self-pity speaking. It is simply a logistical fact of my existence in the grand, chaotic production of the Wallace family. I was the person standing in the blurred background of the shot, holding a drink, filling the negative space so the scene looked realistic. While the main characters delivered their lines in perfect focus, we grew up in the humidity of coastal South Carolina, a place where manners are a contact sport and appearances are the only currency that never inflates. In our world, silence was not golden, silence was failure, and I was very, very silent. My mother, Diane, often introduced us to strangers with a distinct shift in her vocal register. For my sister Blair, her voice would lift an octave, breathless and bright, as she listed accolades that ranged from, "She was prom queen," to, "She just married the most wonderful man." When she got to me, the air would leave her lungs, her tone would flatten, becoming practical and dismissive, the way one might describe a sturdy piece of furniture. "This is Grace," she would say, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "She works with computers." That was the sum total of my identity. She works with computers. It did not matter that I was building complex risk algorithms or managing data security for massive logistics firms. To Diane, and by extension, the rest of our sprawling extended family, I was essentially a gloriously overqualified member of the geek squad. I was the person you called when the printer would not connect to the Wi-Fi, or when you forgot your Apple ID password for the third time in a month. I learned early on that my role was utility. Blair's role was decoration. The dynamic was most potent during the holidays. Our family gatherings were repetitive, exhausting rituals held in a sprawling house that smelled of pine candles, starch, and the marsh mud that sat heavy in the air outside. We would all gather in the living room, a space curated to look like a magazine spread, with cream-colored sofas that no one was allowed to sit on comfortably. Blair would arrive late. She always arrived late. It was part of her brand. She would burst through the door in a flurry of designer bags and high-pitched greetings, bringing a manic energy that the room immediately organized itself around. Everyone would turn. My aunts would coo. My mother would rush forward with a glass of white wine, her face lighting up with a genuine joy she saved exclusively for these moments. Blair would spin a story about the traffic, or a crisis with the florist, or a funny thing her husband Tanner said in the car, and the room would hang on her every word. She was a performer. She fed on the gaze of others. I usually entered through the side door, carrying the heavy dishes or the extra ice bags. I would set them down on the counter, and an aunt might nod at me, or a cousin might mutter a quick hey before turning back to hear the end of Blair's story. I would fade into the periphery. I became very good at blending into the drywall. There is a specific kind of loneliness that happens in a crowded room of people who share your DNA. It is a sharp, cold feeling, like swallowing an ice cube whole. You stand there, holding a plate of appetizers you made but no one will acknowledge, watching them laugh at inside jokes you were not part of. And you realize that you could walk out the front door, drive 3 states away, and start a new life as a goat farmer. And it would take them roughly 3 to 4 weeks to realize you were not in the bathroom. I remember one Easter specifically. The air conditioning had failed in the sunroom, and the heat was rising. Blair was holding court on the patio, wearing a pastel dress that probably cost more than my first car. She was telling a story about a disaster at her hair salon where they had used the wrong toner. She told it with dramatic hand gestures, eyes wide, turning a minor inconvenience into a Greek tragedy. The family was enthralled. My mother was nodding sympathetically, murmuring, Oh, you poor thing. As if Blair had survived a war zone. Meanwhile, my Uncle Robert waved me over from the doorway. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He held out his iPhone, thrusting it into my face. "Grace," he barked, his mouth full of a biscuit. "Look at this. It says unable to join network. Fix it for me. I need to check the scores." I took the phone. I always took the phone. It was easier than arguing. It was easier than trying to explain that I was a cybersecurity analyst, not tech support. I stood in the corner, resetting his network settings. Entering the Wi-Fi password he should have memorized 10 years ago, while 20 feet away, the family toasted to Blair's resilience in the face of bad hair toner. When I handed the phone back to him, Uncle Robert grunted. He did not look at my face. He looked at the screen to make sure the little bars were back. "There," he said, turning his back on me to walk toward the cooler. "Finally." I stood there for a moment. Watching his back, I felt a small, hot coal of humiliation burning in my chest. It was not that he asked for help. It was the entitlement. It was the assumption that my time, my skill, and my presence were essentially public property, available to be claimed whenever something minor inconvenienced them. To them. I was not a person with a catastrophic internal life or dreams or feelings. I was a function. I was a utility app that walked on two legs. I moved out of the house the second I could afford the deposit on a studio apartment. I told myself it was for the commute. But really, it was for the silence. I needed to be in a room where the lack of conversation was my choice, not a judgment. Over the years, the distance between my reality and their perception of me grew into a canyon. I stopped correcting them when they got details wrong. It happened constantly. My mother would introduce me to a neighbor and say, "Grace is living up in North Carolina now," when I had been living in Seattle for 2 years. Or an aunt would send me a birthday card 3 weeks late, inscribed to Gray, a nickname I had never used, with a check for $20 inside. Like I was a teenager mowing lawns. I never sent the checks back. I never corrected the dates. I just deposited the money and threw the cards in the recycling bin. Correcting them felt like begging. It felt like grabbing their faces and shouting, "Look at me, I am real." And I had too much pride for that. If they wanted to know where I lived, they could have asked. If they wanted to know my job title, they could have listened the first 5 times I told them. Blair, of course, did not have this problem. Blair's life was documented in high definition. She lived her life for the feed. Her Instagram was a curated gallery of beige aesthetic perfection. Photos of her coffee artfully arranged next to a designer clutch. Photos of Tanner looking wistfully at the ocean. Photos of her crying with a caption about authenticity and hard days that garnered 300 comments telling her she was brave. The family treated these posts like gospel. At dinner, my mother would pull up Blair's feed on her iPad and pass it around the table like she was showing off the crown jewels. "Did you see what Blair posted today?" Diane would beam. "Look at how she decorated the nursery. She has such an eye. She really should be a designer." They would ooze admiration. They would talk about her perfect life, as if it were a tangible achievement, ignoring the fact that Tanner was constantly changing jobs and that I had overheard Blair on the phone with her credit card company begging for an extension on her limit more times than I could count. But in my family, reality did not matter. The image mattered. If it looked good on a screen, it was true. I, on the other hand, had no digital footprint. I did not post. I did not share. My victories were silent. When I got my first major promotion, managing a team of 12 analysts, I celebrated by buying a bottle of expensive scotch and drinking a glass alone on my balcony in the rain. I did not call my mother. I knew how that conversation would go. She would say, "That is nice, honey," and then immediately pivot to, "Did you know Blair is thinking about getting a golden retriever?" I learned to hoard my own life. I kept it secret, like a stash of gold coins under the floorboards. It felt safer that way. If they did not know about it, they could not diminish it. They could not touch it with their greasy fingerprints or belittle it with their backhanded compliments. But the moment that truly broke the tether, the The moment I knew I was done trying to audition for a role in their lives. Happened last Thanksgiving. We were all seated at the long mahogany table. The turkey was carved. The wine was flowing. The noise level was at a steady roar. Blair was at the head of the table, naturally, recounting a story about how a barista had given her a free latte because she just looked like she needed kindness today. I was seated at the far end, near the kitchen door, next to the children's table. Even though I was 33 years old, I was quietly cutting my green beans, listening to the hum of voices, feeling that familiar cloak of invisibility settling over my shoulders. My cousin's new fiancé, a man I had met exactly once, leaned over to my Uncle Robert. He gestured toward me with his fork. "So," the fiancé asked, trying to be polite, "what does Grace do again?" Uncle Robert did not even look up from his plate. He was busy sawing through a piece of dark meat, without missing a beat. He chewed and said, loudly enough for half the table to hear, "Oh, Grace, she is the tech helper. You know, computers and stuff. If you need your iPad fixed, she is your girl." The tech helper, not a senior risk analyst. Not a woman who had just negotiated a contract worth 6 figures. Not even my niece. The tech helper. The fiancé nodded, looking bored, and turned away. "Cool," he said, dismissing me instantly. I sat there, frozen. My hand tightened around my fork until my knuckles turned white. I looked up the table. My mother was laughing at something Blair said. My father was pouring more wine. No one had flinched. No one had corrected him. No one thought it was strange to reduce a grown woman to the level of a Geek Squad employee. In that moment, something inside of me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was not a dramatic explosion. It was the sound of a very small, very old wire finally giving way under tension. I looked at them. Really looked at them. I saw the desperate hunger in my mother's eyes as she watched Blair, living vicariously through her golden child. I saw the shallow, nervous energy in Blair, constantly performing, terrified that if she stopped smiling, the audience would leave. I saw the arrogance of my uncle, a man who had not achieved a single significant thing in 20 years, feeling entitled to define me. They were not monsters. They were just small. They were small people addicted to a small, shiny version of the world, and they were furious that I refused to fit into the frame they had built. I realized then that I had been waiting for them to see me. I had been waiting for the moment when my mother would look at me with that same shine she gave Blair. I had been waiting for my father to ask me a question about my life that did not involve a printer driver, but waiting was just a passive form of begging, and I was done begging. I took a sip of my water. I set the glass down. I did not make a scene. I did not flip the table. I simply finished my meal, cleared my plate, and washed the dishes, just like I always did. But as I scrubbed the gravy boat in the soapy water, watching the grease dissolve, I made a vow to myself. I was going to build a life so solid, so undeniable, and so formidable that it would not require their applause to feel real. I would build a castle of silence and success, and I would pull up the drawbridge. They wanted me to be background noise fine. I would be the static that drowned them out. I dried my hands. I walked out to my rental car without saying goodbye to anyone. I drove to the airport 4 hours early, sat in the terminal, and booked a one-way ticket back to Seattle. I deleted the family group chat from my phone. They did not notice I was gone until the next day, when my mother called to ask if I had seen her reading glasses. "I am in Seattle, Mom," I said, my voice steady. "Oh," she said, sounding vaguely confused, as if I had teleported. "Already. Well, look, when you have a second, can you explain to your father how to upload photos to the cloud? He is making a mess of it." "No," I said, and then I hung up. It was the first time I had ever said no. It felt terrifying. It felt like jumping off a cliff. But as I stared at my phone, dark and silent in my hand, I realized something else. It felt like the beginning. I built my new life the same way you build a secure network structure. I started from the ground up. I fortified every entry point, and I told absolutely no one where the keys were kept. If my life in South Carolina had been defined by noise and visibility, my life in the professional world became defined by a lethal, efficient silence. I did not post about my hustle. I did not update my status to announce that I was learning Python or SQL at 2 in the morning while eating cold noodles from a takeout container. I did not seek validation from a digital audience. I simply did the work. I started in a basement office of a regional logistics firm, monitoring server loads. It was the kind of unglamorous, fluorescent-lit purgatory that would have made my sister Blair break out in hives. But I loved it. I loved the binary nature of the job. Code either worked or it did not. Data was either secure or it was vulnerable. There were no passive-aggressive comments in lines of code. No social maneuvering required to make a firewall do its job. I devoured certifications the way some people binge-watch television series. I spent my weekends studying network architecture, penetration testing, and forensic accounting. While my family assumed I was fixing paper jams, I was learning how to trace money laundering schemes through shell companies in Eastern Europe. By the time I landed the interview at Blackcinder Risk Solutions, I was no longer the girl who shrank into the corner at parties. Blackcinder was not a household name, and that was by design. They were a boutique firm based in Seattle that handled cyber and fraud prevention for mid-sized banks and international shipping logistics. They were the people you called when you realized your internal audits did not match your bank balance, or when a ransomware attack froze your supply chain in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. The interview was brutal. It lasted 6 hours. When the hiring manager, a woman named Sarah with eyes like laser pointers, asked me why I wanted the job, I did not give her a rehearsed speech about passion. I looked at her and said that I liked fixing things that other people were too loud or too distracted to notice were broken. I got the job. I packed 2 suitcases, sold my car, and flew to Seattle on a rainy Tuesday morning. The distance was intoxicating. 2,900 miles of separation. When I landed, the gray sky felt like a blanket I could wrap around myself. I rented a studio apartment that smelled faintly of damp wool and old coffee, and I went to work. At Blackcinder, I became known as a ghost. In the corporate world, there are show ponies, and there are workhorses. I was neither. I was the operator. I was the person who sat in the back of the briefing room, listening to the panic, and then calmly slid a folder across the table with the solution already mapped out. My rise was vertical and silent. I moved from junior analyst to senior risk consultant in 18 months. 2 years later, I was a lead forensics director. My salary doubled, then tripled. By the time I was 33, I was earning more in a single quarter than my sister Blair and her husband Tanner earned in a combined year. But I never told them. The phone calls home were a masterclass in omission. My mother would call on Sunday afternoons, usually while she was driving somewhere. Her attention divided. "How is the weather up there?" she would ask, distracted. "Is it raining?" "It sounds miserable." "It is fine," I would say. "Just working a lot?" "Still doing the computer stuff." "Yes, still doing the computer stuff." "Well," she would sigh, "don't work too hard. You sound tired. Are you making enough to pay for heat? I saw on the news that Seattle is expensive." I would look around my office, at the ergonomically designed chair that cost $1,000, and the dual monitors displaying real-time threat maps of the global banking system. "I am getting by," I would say. "I manage." I let them believe the narrative they had already written for me. It was safer. If they thought I was struggling, they felt superior. If they felt superior, they were benevolent. They would send me $20 Starbucks gift cards for Christmas with notes that said, "Treat yourself," and I would say thank you, and the balance of the universe would remain undisturbed. The contrast between my reality and their perception was sharpest during the holidays when I visited, or when I was forced to endure a FaceTime call. Blair's husband, Tanner, was the primary source of noise. Tanner was a man who spoke exclusively in buzzwords. He was always on the verge of something huge. He was into crypto, then he was into flipping real estate, then he was into high-yield dropshipping. "Big things coming, Grace," he would say. leaning into the camera, his face slightly distorted by the lens. "I have got a meeting with some heavy hitters next week. We are talking 7 figures. Easy. You should look into it. I could get you in on the ground floor." He never offered specifics. It was always opportunities and plays and networking. I would watch him speak, observing the desperate tightness around his eyes, the way he checked his watch to look busy. I knew, because I knew how to read people and data, that Tanner was drowning. I could hear the panic in his voice that he tried to mask with volume. I never called him out. I just nodded and said, "Wow, Tanner, sounds intense." "It is a grind," he would say, puffing out his chest. "But you know, you have to spend money to make money. That is the game." While Tanner played his game, I made my move. 3 years into my tenure at Black Cinder, I bought a home. I did not buy a fixer-upper. I did not buy a starter home. I bought a 2-bedroom condo on the top floor of a glass tower overlooking Elliott Bay. It had floor-to-ceiling windows, wide plank oak floors, and a kitchen with marble countertops that were cool to the touch. The day I signed the papers, I stood in the empty living room and watched the ferries cutting through the dark water of the Sound. The city lights were blinking on, a grid of gold and white against the twilight. I had done this alone. No loans from parents, no husband's income, no ground floor opportunities, just the compounding interest of competence and discipline. I called my mother that night. "I moved," I said. "Oh," she sounded wary. "Did they raise your rent again? I told you that city was a trap." "No," I said, keeping my voice flat. "I just found a new place. It is a condo." "Renting a condo?" she asked. "That sounds pricey." "Grace, be careful." I hesitated for a fraction of a second. I could have told her then. I could have told her the price tag. I could have told her about the 20% down payment I had wired that morning without blinking. "It is a small place," I said instead. "Near the office. It saves me money on gas." "Well, as long as it is safe," she said, losing interest. "Oh, listen, Blair just got the most adorable new patio set. You have to see the photos on Facebook." "I will look," I said. I hung up and walked to my wine fridge, a built-in feature of the island, and poured myself a glass of Sancerre. I drank it standing at the window, looking out at the city that I had conquered, feeling the exquisite power of holding a secret that no one suspected. My professional reputation grew as quietly and steadily as my bank account. I became the person people called when they were scared. I did not yell. I did not panic. I walked into boardrooms where men twice my age were sweating through their dress shirts because they had lost a database. And I fixed it. I started mentoring, too. But I did it my way. I did not speak on panels. I did not write thought leader in my bio. I found the quiet girls, the ones in the back of the room who took frantic notes, the ones who did the work while the guys with the loud voices took the credit. I would take them out for coffee, usually at a place 5 blocks away from the office so we would not be interrupted. "You are good," I would tell them, "but you are waiting for permission to be right. Stop waiting." I taught them how to negotiate salaries. I taught them how to document their wins so they could not be erased during performance reviews. I taught them that silence was a weapon, not a weakness. If you knew how to use it, I was building a small army of women who knew their value. Women who would never be the background noise in their own careers. Life was good. It was controlled. It was ordered. I had my routine. I had my dog, a rescue greyhound named Miller, who was as quiet and anxious as I used to be. We would walk along the waterfront in the rain. 2 ghosts moving through the mist, perfectly content. Then the envelope arrived. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock, heavy enough to be a weapon. The calligraphy was hand-done, the ink shimmering in gold. "Evelyn Wallace's 81st Jubilee. The pleasure of your company is requested at the Harborview Estate." My grandmother, Evelyn, was the matriarch of the Wallace family, but she was cut from a different cloth than my mother or Blair. She was sharp, unsentimental, and terrifyingly observant. She was the only person in the family who looked at you and saw the bones beneath the skin. She had not been warm to me growing up, She was not warm to anyone, but she had never dismissed me. She simply watched. The invitation was not a request. In our family, ignoring a summons from Grandma Evelyn was akin to treason. It was a command performance. I held the card in my hand, running my thumb over the raised lettering. The party was in 2 weeks. It would be in South Carolina, at a venue that cost more for one night than I used to make in a year. I knew what going back meant. It meant stepping out of the sanctuary I had built and walking back into the arena. It meant shrinking. It meant putting on the costume of the tech helper and enduring the pitying looks and the questions about my little job. I looked at the view outside my window. The ferries were still moving. The city was still solid. I was solid. I was not that girl anymore. I had the bank accounts, the title, and the keys to this fortress to prove it. But they did not know that. A thought sparked in my mind, a dangerous, seductive thought. What if I didn't shrink this time? I had spent years building this armor. I had spent years sharpening my edges in the dark. Maybe it was time to see if the armor held up against the only things that had ever truly managed to hurt me, their indifference and their suffocating, patronizing love. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and typed in the URL for the airline. I did not look for the cheapest flight with a layover in Atlanta. I selected the direct flight, first class. I booked the ticket. Then I picked up my phone and texted my mother, "I will be there." I did not add a smiley face. I did not offer to help with the setup. I simply confirmed my attendance. I set the phone down on the marble counter. The screen went dark. The background noise was about to get very, very loud. The Harborview Estate was the kind of venue that existed solely to intimidate people who did not have a trust fund. It was a sprawling, white-columned mansion perched on the edge of the marshes, surrounded by live oaks draped in Spanish moss that looked like old lace. The air smelled of salt water, expensive perfume, and the specific, metallic scent of roasted oysters. I stepped out of the rental car, a black sedan, crisp and nondescript, and handed the keys to the valet. He glanced at me, then at the car, then back at me. I was not driving the sort of vehicle usually parked in this driveway, but I was wearing the sort of clothes that made the car irrelevant. I had curated my appearance for this night with the same precision I used to hunt for vulnerabilities in a banking firewall. I was not wearing sequins. I was not wearing bright colors. I was wearing a charcoal silk jumpsuit that moved like water, tailored to within a millimeter of my life, and a blazer draped over my shoulders. My hair, which I used to pull back in a frizzy, apologetic ponytail, was now a sharp, angled bob that hit my jawline like a blade. I wore no jewelry except for a single, thin gold watch. I looked like what I was, a woman who signed checks, not a woman who waited for them. I walked up the limestone steps. The sound of the party drifted out, a jazz band playing something low and brassy, the clinking of glass, the roar of 50 simultaneous conversations. My heart did a slow, heavy thud against my ribs, but my hands were steady. I had spent years training myself to remain calm while watching cyber attacks unfold in real time. Facing my family was just another form of crisis management. I entered the ballroom. For a moment, no one noticed. The ecosystem of the party was already established. Blair was in the center of the room, naturally. She was wearing a red dress that was slightly too tight and slightly too loud, holding a champagne flute, laughing with her head thrown back. Her husband, Tanner, was standing next to her, gesturing wildly with a cigar he probably did not know how to smoke properly, talking to a local real estate developer. My mother, Diane, was hovering near them, beaming, acting as the master of ceremonies for the Blair show. I walked to the bar. I ordered a sparkling water with lime. The bartender served me quickly, his eyes lingering on the watch on my wrist. I turned around and waited. It took 3 minutes. Diane turned to scan the room, looking for a waiter to harass, and her eyes swept over me. They kept moving, past me, to a potted palm. Then, her brain seemed to stutter. Her gaze snapped back. She squinted. I saw the confusion on her face. It was a genuine cognitive dissonance. She knew I was coming, but the image stored in her database labeled Grace did not match the woman standing by the bar. The Grace she knew was slumped shoulders, ill-fitting department store slacks, and a nervous smile. The woman she was looking at stood with a straight spine and a terrifying calmness. "Grace," she said it loud enough to cut through the nearby chatter. I smiled. It was a small, polite smile, the kind you give a client before you tell them their security protocols are 5 years out of date. "Hello, Mother," I said. She walked toward me. She did not rush to hug me. She walked slowly, as if she were approaching a strange dog that might bite. She stopped 2 feet away and looked me up and down. Her eyes lingered on the fabric of my blazer, then the cut of my hair. "You made it," she said. She sounded almost disappointed that I had not failed. "I thought you might miss the connection. You know how those budget flights are." "The flight was fine," I said. I did not mention that the lay-flat seat in first class was quite comfortable. "You look." She searched for a word. She wanted to say expensive, but she could not bring herself to admit it. "Different. Did you cut your hair? It is very severe." "It is efficient," I said, before she could critique me further. The air pressure in the room shifted. Blair had spotted us. "Grace," my sister descended upon me like a hurricane of floral perfume and aggressive affection. She threw her arms around me, squeezing tight, rocking me back and forth. It was a performance. It was a hug designed for the audience, to show everyone what a close, loving family we were. I stood stiffly in her embrace, not yielding. When she pulled back, she kept her hands on my shoulders, pinning me in place. Her eyes were not warm, they were scanners. She was reading my face, my skin, my clothes. She was looking for cracks. She was looking for the telltale signs of the struggling, unhappy sister she needed me to be. "Oh my God!" Blair shrieked, her voice pitched high enough to shatter glass. "Look at you. You look so corporate, very Seattle. Is this what everyone wears up there? It is so gray." "It is charcoal," I corrected gently. "Well, I am just so glad you could get time off," Blair said, loud enough for the nearby cousins to hear. "I know how strict those hourly jobs can be with shifts. Did you have to swap with someone?" She smiled. It was a weaponized smile. She was reminding the room of my place. Grace, the hourly worker. Grace, the tech support. "I manage my own schedule," I said. Right. She waved a hand dismissively. "Tanner is the same way. The burden of the entrepreneur. Right, always on the grind." She linked her arm through mine, not giving me a choice, and pulled me toward the head table. "Come on, Grandma has been asking for you, although, warning, she is in a mood." She told Uncle Robert his toupee looked like a dead muskrat. We navigated through the crowd. I felt eyes on me. People were whispering. I caught snippets of it. "Is that Grace? She looks different. Did she lose weight? Who is she wearing?" We reached the main table. Grandma Evelyn was sitting in a high-backed velvet chair like a queen on a throne. She was 80 years old today, but her eyes were as clear and cold as gin. She was wearing a suit of navy brocade and a string of pearls that were real enough to buy a mid-sized sedan. She was watching the party with a look of mild distaste, as if she found the entire display vulgar. When Blair dragged me into her line of sight, Evelyn's expression did not change, but her focus sharpened. "Happy birthday, Grandma," I said. Evelyn looked at me. She did not look at my clothes. She looked at my eyes. She stared at me for a long, uncomfortable 5 seconds. It felt like she was reading the code beneath the interface. "You are late," she said. "I have been here for 20 minutes, I replied. "I was getting a drink." "You did not come say hello immediately," she noted. "Good. Shows you have a backbone. Sit down." She pointed to the empty chair next to her. It was a position of honor. Usually, this seat was reserved for Diane or Blair. Diane, who was trailing behind us, looked like she had just swallowed a lemon. I sat. The music lowered. The room settled. It was that lull in the evening where people stopped circulating and started eavesdropping. We were on display. "So," Evelyn said, her voice gravelly and commanding. "Seattle, You are still there? Yes, ma'am, I said. Diane tells me you are working in a computer shop, Evelyn said. She picked up her wine glass. Fixing laptops, something like that. I glanced at my mother. Diane was smiling nervously, smoothing the napkin on her lap. She had diminished me to keep the peace, to keep the hierarchy intact. Something like that, I said. And where are you living? Evelyn asked. She took a sip of wine. Diane says you are in some closet of an apartment, renting, wasting money. Diane jumped in before I could speak. The panic in her voice was palpable. She needed to control the narrative. She needed to protect the version of the world where Blair was the princess and I was the peasant. Oh, you know, Mother, Diane said, laughing a breathless, nervous laugh. It is the city. Everything is so expensive. Grace has a practical place, somewhere near downtown. Right, Grace tiny, but it works for her. She is hardly ever there anyway, with all the hours she works. Diane looked at me, her eyes pleading. Agree with me. Be small. Do not embarrass us. The table was quiet. Blair was smirking into her champagne. Tanner was checking his phone. My Uncle Robert was listening with half an ear. I looked at my mother, then I looked at my grandmother. I took a sip of my sparkling water. I set the glass down on the white tablecloth. The click of the glass against the table sounded like a gavel. Actually, I said, my voice was not loud, but it projected. I used the same tone I used when briefing a board of directors on a security breach calm, factual, and absolute. It is not a rental. Diane froze. What? I do not rent, I said. I turned to look fully at my grandmother. It is a condo overlooking Elliott Bay, 2,000 square feet, floor-to-ceiling glass. I bought it 2 years ago. The silence that followed was instantaneous and violent. It was as if I had pulled a pin on a grenade and set it in the center of the centerpiece. My cousin, who had been drinking his champagne, actually choked. He coughed, a wet, hacking sound that echoed in the quiet room. Bought. The word came from Tanner. He had looked up from his phone. His mouth was slightly open. You bought real estate in downtown Seattle, Tanner asked. His voice cracked. Do you know what the price per square foot is down there? I do, I said. I am very familiar with the market. Diane was blinking rapidly. Her computer was crashing. The data did not compute. But Grace, how you fix computers? I turned to her. I let the mask drop just a fraction. I let her see the steel underneath. I am a director of forensic risk for Black Cinder Solutions, I said. I do not fix computers. Mother, I fix banks, I fix corporations, and I am paid extremely well to do it. I picked up my glass again. And the condo has a view of the Olympics. You should see it. The sunsets are quite nice. The silence stretched. It was heavy. It was thick. Then, the shift happened. It was physical. I watched it ripple through the table. Tanner's posture changed. He sat up straighter. He put his phone away. He leaned in, his elbows hitting the table. The look of boredom was gone, replaced by a sharp, greedy focus. Forensic risk, Tanner said. That is high-level stuff. Grace, we are talking institutional finance big data. Yes, I said. Wow, he said. He licked his lips. It was a predatory gesture. I had no idea. We should talk. I have been looking into some data security plays for my new venture. Serious synergy there. Blair was staring at me. Her smirk was gone. Her face was pale. She looked at my blazer again. But this time, she really looked. She saw the quality of the silk. She saw the lack of lint. She saw the watch on my wrist. I saw her doing the math in her head. She was calculating the cost of the condo. She was realizing that while she was financing a leased SUV, I was sitting on 7 figures of equity. You bought it 2 years ago, Blair asked. Her voice was thin. Why didn't you tell us? You never asked, I said. Well, Diane stammered, trying to pivot, trying to find a way to claim this victory as her own. Well, isn't that wonderful? My goodness, I always said Grace was the smart one. Didn't I always say that? She looked around the table, desperate for validation. No one looked at her. They were all looking at me. Suddenly, there was not background noise. I was the signal. My Uncle Robert, the man who had called me the tech helper without looking at my face, leaned forward. He smiled, showing his teeth. So, Grace, Seattle, that is a booming market. You must have a good portfolio going. Who is handling your investments? I handle my own, I said. Smart, he said. Smart girl. You know, I have been thinking about diversifying. Maybe we could grab coffee tomorrow. Pick your brain. I looked at them. I looked at the sudden warmth in their eyes. I looked at the way they were leaning toward me, like flowers turning toward the sun. 10 minutes ago, I was invisible. I was the poor relation. I was the failure. Now, I was a resource. I felt a rush of satisfaction. It was hot and bright, like a flare in the dark. I had done it. I had forced them to see me. I had forced them to acknowledge that I was not a piece of furniture, but as I looked at Tanner's hungry eyes, and Blair's fearful calculation, and my mother's desperate grasping, the satisfaction cooled rapidly. It turned into something cold and slimy in my stomach. They did not look at me with pride. They did not look at me with love. They looked at me the way a starving man looks at a loaf of bread. They looked at me and saw a wallet. Grandma Evelyn let out a short, dry laugh. It sounded like dry leaves crunching. Well, Evelyn said, picking up her fork. It seems the wallpaper has teeth. She sliced into her cake. I took a sip of my water. The bubbles hissed in the glass. The air in the room had changed. Yes, but it was not cleaner. It was just charged with a different kind of danger. So, Grace, Tanner said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. About this condo, did you finance or— Tanner, I said. I did not raise my voice. I just looked at him until he stopped talking. Pass the salt. He passed the salt. He did it immediately. I sprinkled it on my food, knowing that for the rest of the night, I would not be able to eat a single bite without someone watching my hands, wondering what else I was holding that they could take. The morning after the party, my phone vibrated against the nightstand with a ferocity I had not felt in years. I woke up in the high thread count sheets of my hotel room, reaching for the device with the reflex of someone expecting a server outage notification. It was not a server alert. It was a text message from Blair, Grace. Oh my God. Last night was so crazy. I feel like we did not even get to talk properly. I miss you so much. Coffee this morning. Just us sisters. Please say yes. There were 3 heart emojis and a crying face emoji. I stared at the screen. The blue light seemed to burn the retinas of my eyes. For the last decade, my interactions with Blair had been limited to logistical texts about holiday arrival times or links to her Amazon wish list for the baby. She had not used the phrase just us sisters since we were children, usually right before she convinced me to take the blame for breaking a vase. My risk analyst brain, the part of me that protected billions of dollars of assets for Fortune 500 companies, immediately flagged this as suspicious activity. The timing was too convenient. The emotional temperature was too high. The data points suggested a phishing attempt. But the other part of me, the part that was still the little girl standing in the hallway listening to my mother praise Blair's piano recital, felt a warm, treacherous flush of hope. I typed back where we met at a coffee shop near the marina. It was the kind of place that sold artisanal toast for $12. Blair was already there, sitting at a corner table. When I walked in, she waved frantically, her face lighting up with a brilliance that felt almost blinding. She stood up and hugged me again, holding on for a beat longer than necessary. You look amazing, she gushed, pulling back to look at me. Seriously, Grace, that suit last night, iconic. I told Tanner, I said, Grace has been holding out on us. We sat down. She had already ordered for me a black coffee. She remembered, or maybe she just guessed. So, she said, leaning in, resting her chin on her hand. Tell me everything. How long have you been, rich? She laughed, trying to make it sound like a joke, but her eyes were not laughing. They were calculating. I am not rich, Blair, I said, taking a sip of the coffee. I am comfortable. I work hard. Right, she said quickly. Of course, God, I envy that focus. My life right now is just… She let out a long, shuddering sigh. Her shoulders slumped. The bright facade cracked just enough to show a glimpse of genuine exhaustion, or perhaps a very convincing simulation of it. It is drowning me. Grace, honestly, I waited. This was the opening move. Tanner is working so hard, she continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. But this market is brutal. His new venture needs capital to really pop. You know? And with the baby, do you know how much daycare costs? It is criminal. We are paying $2,000 a month. $2,000. And that is for the cheap place. She looked out the window, her eyes glistening. I just want Leo to have the best. I want him to have the life we had. But sometimes I look at the bank account and I just want to scream. She stopped. She did not ask. She left the silence there, a gaping hole in the conversation, waiting for me to fill it. It was a masterclass in passive solicitation. I looked at her. I saw the frayed hem of her sleeve. I saw the dark circles she had tried to cover with concealer. My logical brain screamed, do not do it. My logical brain screamed, she is manipulating you. But then she looked back at me, and for a second, she looked like my little sister again, the one I used to read to when thunder shook the house. I can help with the daycare, I said. The words left my mouth before I had authorized the transaction. Blair's head snapped up. What no, Grace, I was not asking. I know, I said, but I want to. Leo is my nephew. Send me the bill for the next 6 months. I will take care of it. The relief that washed over her face was so raw it was almost obscene. Grace, oh my God, are you serious? That is $12,000. I know how much it is, I said. Send it. She reached across the table and grabbed my hand. Her palm was damp. You are the best. Seriously, you are the best sister in the world. I do not know what I would do without you. The dopamine hit was instant. It flooded my system, warm and golden. The best sister. I do not know what I would do without you. It was the drug I had been craving my entire life. I knew, intellectually, that I had just purchased this affection. I knew the price tag was exactly $12,000, but in that moment, sitting in the sunlit cafe, I did not care. The floodgates opened. By the time I returned to my hotel room, my phone was buzzing again. This time it was my mother. Grace, honey, Diane's voice was breathless. Blair just told me what you did for the baby. I am in tears, literal tears. It is fine. Mom, I said, putting the phone on speaker while I opened my laptop. It is not fine. It is saintly, she said. You have such a generous heart. I always knew that about you. You know, I was just standing here in the kitchen, looking at these cabinets. You remember the cabinets, the ones that have been peeling since 1998? I stopped typing. I knew where this was going. Dad has been promising to fix them for a decade. She sighed. But with his back and the cost of lumber, we just keep putting it off. It is just so depressing. Grace, cooking in a place that feels like it is falling down around you. After everything we have been through as a family, I wanted one nice thing. After everything we have been through. The phrase was a hook, designed to catch on my guilt. What exactly had we been through? Middle-class suburban boredom. How much is the remodel? I asked. My voice sounded flat to my own ears. Oh, I got a quote last week. Just for fun, she said, her voice instantly losing its tragic timbre. It is around 8,000. Nothing fancy, just functional. I will transfer it, I said. Consider it a late birthday present. Grace, she shrieked. You are, oh, I cannot believe it. You are saving this family. You really are. I hung up. I stared at my banking app. In the span of 3 hours, I had authorized $20,000 in transfers. That was more than my mother used to make in a year. I felt a strange, hollow buzzing in my chest. It felt like being needed, and because I was starving, I mistook that feeling for being loved. Then came Tanner. Tanner did not call. Tanner sent voice notes. I hated voice notes. They were inefficient and presumptuous. "Hey, G-Money." His voice boomed through my phone speakers, accompanied by the sound of wind, like he was driving with the windows down. "Just heard the good news about the assist with the kid. You are a legend. Seriously. Hey, listen, since you are obviously liquid right now, I wanted to run something by you. I have this opportunity with a logistics startup in Charleston. Real disruptive stuff. Blockchain integration. I know that is your wheelhouse. I need a seed investor to round out the round. We are talking $50,000 for a 5% equity stake. It is a rocket ship. Grace, I want you on board before it leaves the stratosphere. Hit me back." He did not ask how I was. He did not say thank you for paying for his child's care. He spoke to me as if I were a venture capital firm with legs. G-Money. The nickname made my skin crawl. I did not respond to Tanner immediately. I let the message sit there, unread, but the dynamic had shifted. The silence that had defined my relationship with my family for the last 5 years was gone. I was suddenly added back to the family group chat. The Wallace tribe. I had been quietly removed, or perhaps I had left and they started a new one years ago. Now, my phone pinged constantly. "Diane. Look at this tile for the backsplash, Grace. What do you think, Blair photo of Leo? He says thank you, Auntie Grace, Uncle Robert. Hey Grace, got a question about crypto. Call me..." They were love-bombing me. It was a term I used in fraud analysis to describe when a scammer overwhelms a target with affection and attention to lower their defenses. I recognized the pattern. I saw the red flags waving in the wind, but I did not block them. I answered the texts. I picked the tile. I sent the heart emojis back. I noticed the rhythm of it within 2 days. It was a distinct algorithm. Step 1. A compliment or an expression of affection. "You are so smart. Grace, we missed you so much." Step 2. A pause, a beat of silence to let the compliment sink in. Step 3. The ask. "Could you look at this bill? Do you think you could cover the flight for the reunion?" It was a commercial break before the pitch. The affection was the advertisement, and my money was the product they were buying. On my last night in town, I was sitting on the balcony of my hotel room, watching the moon reflect off the marsh water. My phone rang. It was Grandma Evelyn. I answered immediately. "Hello, Grandma." "You are leaving tomorrow," she stated. It was not a question. "Yes. Early flight." "Good," she said. "Get out while you still have a shirt on your back." I smiled faintly. "I am fine, Grandma. I can afford it." "I know you can afford it," Evelyn said sharply. Her voice was clear, cutting through the humid night air. "That is not the point. You are a smart girl. Grace, you are the smartest one of the lot. So tell me something." She paused. I could hear the click of her lighter. She was smoking, a habit she refused to quit despite 3 doctors telling her it would kill her. "Are they being kind?" she asked. "Or are they being convenient?" The question hung in the air. It was a precise surgical incision. It cut straight through the layers of denial I had wrapped around myself for the last 48 hours. Are they being kind, or are they being convenient? I looked at the text message from Blair on my screen. "Love you, sis. Also, my car is making a weird noise. Do you think they are family?" I said to Evelyn. It was a weak defense, and I knew it. "Family?" Evelyn scoffed. A plume of smoke exhaled into the receiver. "Family is the people who sit with you when you are bankrupt. These people. These people are sitting with you because you are the buffet. Be careful. Grace, hunger does not have a conscience, and they are very, very hungry." She hung up. I sat there for a long time. The screen of my phone went dark. I knew she was right. I knew, with the cold certainty of a mathematician, that the equation did not balance. The input was money. The output was a simulation of love. If I stopped the input, the output would cease. But as I sat there in the dark, I opened my banking app again. I looked at the transfer for the kitchen. I looked at the transfer for the daycare. For the first time in my life, my mother had told me I was saving the family. For the first time, Blair had called me the best. I felt a pathetic, aching crack in my resolve. I knew it was a lie. I knew I was buying tickets to a play where I was the only audience member, but I was so lonely, and the play was so beautiful. I opened Tanner's voice note. I listened to it again. 50,000. I did not send the money, not yet. My survival instinct was not completely dead, but I did not say no. I typed a message. Send me the prospectus. I will look at the numbers. I was testing the waters, or maybe I was just drowning, and I had decided that if I was going to go down, I might as well enjoy the warm embrace of the water on the way to the bottom. I went to sleep that night telling myself I was in control. I told myself I was just managing the asset of my family. I was lying. I was just the background noise girl, finally hearing her name on the radio, and I was willing to pay any price to keep the song playing. The call came on a Tuesday night in November. It was raining in Seattle. A relentless, gray sheet of water washing against the floor-to-ceiling glass of my living room. I was sitting on the sofa with Miller, my greyhound, his head resting heavy and warm on my knee. When the phone buzzed, it was Grandma Evelyn. Usually, Evelyn called to complain about the humidity or the incompetence of her doctors, but tonight, her silence on the other end of the line was heavy. It was the kind of silence that has mass. "Grace," she said. Her voice was not its usual sharp, commanding bark. It was low, tired, and laced with a specific kind of disappointment that I recognized immediately because I had carried it myself for 30 years. "Grandma." I muted the television. "Is everything okay? Are you at the hospital?" "No," she said. "I am at home. I was just at your mother's house. They had a barbecue, celebrating the new kitchen counters you paid for." "Oh," I said, a small knot of anxiety tightening in my stomach. "Did they like them?" "They loved them," Evelyn said. She paused, and I heard the distinct click of a lighter. She took a drag, exhaling slowly. "I left early. I forgot my purse on the patio table. I went back around the side of the house to get it. The sliding door was open. They did not hear me walking on the grass." My heart stopped. In my line of work, we call this a zero-day exploit, an unseen vulnerability exposed without warning. I knew, with a sickening certainty, that I did not want to hear what came next, but I also knew I had to. "What did you hear, Grandma?" "They were drinking," she said. "They were happy, laughing. Tanner was pouring shots." She took another breath. "Your mother said, 'It is about time Grace made herself useful. God knows she owes us for all those years of being a lump on the sofa.'" The air left my lungs. A lump on the sofa. I thought about the years I spent fixing their computers, driving them to appointments, listening to their problems, making myself invisible so I would not be a burden. Tanner laughed. Evelyn continued, her voice devoid of mercy. He said, "Don't worry, Di, I have got her handled. We just have to keep her sweet. A few emojis, a few phone calls, the tap is open. Ladies and gentlemen, I am going to have that investment money by Christmas." I closed my eyes. I pressed my hand into the soft fur of Miller's neck until he shifted comfortably. "And Blair?" I asked. My voice was a whisper. "Did Blair say anything?" "Yes," Evelyn said. "Blair was the one who laughed the hardest." She said, "The sad part is, she actually thinks this is love. It is almost pathetic how easy it is. You just tell her she is the best sister, and she wires $5,000. It is like a vending machine." It is like a vending machine. The world did not shatter. It did not explode. It simply went quiet. The rain against the window stopped sounding like weather and started sounding like static. The warmth I had been feeling for the last 2 months, the glowing, golden warmth of being included, of being G-money, of being the best sister, evaporated instantly, leaving behind a cold, hard vacuum. I did not cry. Crying implies a loss of something real. This was not a loss. This was a clarification. It was data. Raw, unadulterated data finally overriding the corrupted file I'd been trying to read for decades. "Grace," Evelyn asked, "are you there?" "I am here," I said. My voice sounded strange. It was calm, terrifyingly calm. It was the voice I used when I told a CEO that his company had been compromised from the inside. "I am sorry," Evelyn said, and that was the most shocking part of all. Evelyn Wallace did not apologize. "I thought you should know. I told you. Hunger does not have a conscience." "Thank you, Grandma," I said. "I have to go." "What are you going to do?" she asked. "I am going to run a diagnostic," I said. "I am going to test the system." I hung up. I sat in the dark for a long time. I looked at the city lights of Seattle, blurring through the rain. I felt a profound, heavy dread settling into my bones. It was not the dread of being unloved I had lived with that my whole life. It was the dread of knowing that my hope had been their weapon. They had taken the purest, most vulnerable part of me, my desire to belong to them, and they had monetized it. I did not sleep that night. I sat up and formulated a plan. I did not want to scream at them. Screaming gives them power. Screaming tells them they hurt me. I did not want them to know they had hurt me. I wanted to know the absolute boundaries of their greed. I decided to change one variable. Just one. I would continue to be Grace the sister. I would text back. I would be available. I would be kind. I would send the heart emojis. I would listen to their problems. But the wallet was closed. The test began the next morning. Blair sent a text at 10 o'clock. "Hey, bestie." "Ugh, disaster morning." My car started making that noise again. "Mechanic says it is the transmission. $3,000 to fix." I am literally crying in the parking lot. I do not know how we are going to pay for this and Christmas presents for Leo. Life is so unfair. It was a perfect pitch. The distress. The guilt. Leo's Christmas. The specific dollar amount planted in the text like a call to action. In the past 2 days ago, I would have replied, "Send me the invoice." I got it. Instead, I typed, "Oh no, Blair. That sounds so stressful. I am so sorry you are dealing with that. Have you tried getting a second opinion? Sometimes mechanics overcharge." I hit send. I watched the 3 little dots appear. They bubbled for a long time. Then they disappeared. Then they reappeared. Yeah. Tanner looked at it. "It is definitely the transmission. We are just so broke right now. I might have to return Leo's gifts." She was escalating. She was holding the child hostage. I replied, "That is heartbreaking. But kids are resilient. He will love whatever you get him. Maybe you can do some homemade crafts. Those are always special." The silence that followed lasted for 4 hours. When she finally replied, the tone had shifted. The exclamation points were gone. "Yeah, maybe." 2 days later, it was Diane. She sent me a flurry of photos, renovation photos. She had moved on from the kitchen to the sunroom. "Look at these windows." "Grace," she wrote, "the contractor says the old frames are rotting. If we do not fix them, the whole wall could collapse. It is a safety hazard. But materials are insane right now. Lumber is up 40%. We are not getting any younger. You know, I just want a safe house for your father." The implication was clear. If I did not pay, my father would be crushed by a falling wall, and it would be my fault. I called her. "Hi, Mom," I said, my voice bright and cheerful. "I got the photos. The rot looks bad." "It is terrible," she said, her voice dropping into her tragic victim register. "Your father is so worried. We do not have that kind of liquidity right now. Grace, not with the kitchen payments." "I understand," I said. "It is a tough economy. Have you looked into a home equity line of credit with the market value up? You should get a great rate." There was a pause, a cold, dead air on the line. "A loan?" Diane asked, her voice sharp. "At our age, Grace, we were hoping well, since you are doing so well." "I am doing well," I agreed, "but my liquidity is tied up in investments right now. I cannot access it without penalties, but I can help you look at loan applications. I am really good at paperwork." "I do not need help with paperwork," she snapped. The mask slipped. "Just for a second. I need, well, never mind. If you are busy, you are busy." She hung up without saying goodbye. The decay was fascinating to watch. It was like watching a time-lapse video of fruit rotting. As soon as the nutrient source, my money, was cut off, the organism of their affection began to wither. The group chat grew quiet. The daily photos of Leo stopped. The thinking of you texts vanished. Then came Tanner. Tanner was not subtle. Tanner was desperate. He called me on a Thursday. He did not waste time with small talk. "Grace," he said, "listen, the window on this logistics deal is closing. I need that 50,000 by Friday, or we lose the position. I sent you the prospectus. Did you read it?" "I did," I said. I was sitting in my office, looking at the skyline. "I read it. Tanner, it is very ambitious." "It is a gold mine," he corrected. "So, can I count on you? Wire transfers best." "Tanner," I said gently, "I am going to pass." "Pass." He repeated the word as if it were in a foreign language. "What do you mean, pass? You said you were interested." "I said I would look at the numbers," I said. "I looked. The risk profile is too high for my portfolio right now. It does not fit my strategy." "Strategy." His voice rose. "Grace, we are family. Family invests in family. This is not about strategy. This is about helping us build a future. You have the money sitting there doing nothing." "My money is actually working very hard," I said. "It is just not working for you." "You are being selfish," he spat. The veneer of the cool, successful brother-in-law dissolved, revealing the angry, entitled man-child beneath. "You are sitting up there in your ivory tower, judging us. After everything we have done to include you, we let you back in. Grace, we made an effort. We let you back in. There it was. The transaction fee, the admission price. They felt they had done me a favor by acknowledging my existence, and now I was defaulting on the payment. I appreciate the effort, Tanner, I said, but the answer is no. You are going to regret this, he said. When we are millionaires, do not come crawling back asking for a piece. I won't, I said. He hung up. The silence that followed over the next few weeks was different from the silence of my past. It was not the silence of being ignored. It was the silence of a siege. They were freezing me out. They were punishing me. I watched it happen with a detachment that surprised me. I felt like a scientist observing a specimen in a jar. Subject becomes aggressive when stimulus is removed. I went through the motions of my life. I worked. I walked Miller. I ate dinner alone looking at the dark water of the bay, but inside, a cold, hard resolve was hardening like concrete. I was done. I was absolutely, irrevocably done. But I needed to finish it properly. I needed to close the book. The invitation arrived in early December. It was an email this time, not a fancy card. It was from Diane. The subject line was Christmas at the lake house. Family healing. Dearest Grace, we know things have been a little tense lately. Money always complicates things, doesn't it? We hate that. We miss you. We want to put all this business stuff behind us and just be a family again. We are renting a big cabin at Lake Jacassi for Christmas. Just us. No stress. Please come. It would mean the world to your father and me. Let's start fresh. Love, Mom. I read the email. I read between the lines. Money always complicates things. That was their way of blaming me for their greed. Family healing. That was the bait. I knew what this was. This was the Hail Mary pass. This was them realizing that the aggressive approach had failed. So they were pivoting back to the love bombing, but with higher stakes. They needed me in the room. They needed to get me physically present, surrounded by nostalgia and eggnog and guilt, to break me down. They probably had a new script, a medical emergency, a surprise pregnancy, a threatened foreclosure. I hovered my mouse over the delete button. I could just not go. I could change my number. I could disappear. But if I disappeared now, I would always wonder. I would always have that tiny, nagging voice in the back of my head saying, maybe they really did want to heal. Maybe you were too harsh. I needed to see it. I needed to look them in the eye one last time. I needed to see the monster without the mask, in high definition, so I could never, ever trick myself into loving it again. I hit reply. I will be there. I typed. I booked my ticket. This time. I did not buy gifts. I did not arrange for a transfer of funds just in case. I packed my bags. I packed my black silk jumpsuit. I packed my sharpest blazer. And I packed the folder of documents Grandma Evelyn had mailed me copies of the trust. Copies of old emails she had printed out. Evidence of things I had never known. I was going home for Christmas, but I was not bringing peace. I was bringing the truth. And for the Wallace family, the truth was the most dangerous gift of all. The cabin at Lake Jocassee was a masterpiece of curated holiday aesthetic. It was a sprawling timber structure with vaulted ceilings and a stone fireplace large enough to roast a whole pig. The air inside was thick with the scent of cinnamon brooms and expensive pine candles. A sensory overload designed to simulate warmth. My mother, Diane, had insisted on matching buffalo plaid pajamas for everyone, including the baby. Leo, I put mine on. I played the part. I felt like an undercover agent slipping into a disguise. Blair was in her element. She was directing the evening like a stage manager, moving people around to get the best lighting for her photos. She positioned Tanner by the fire with a glass of scotch. She positioned our parents on the sofa with the baby. She positioned me in the background, just out of focus, handing out mugs of cocoa. Everyone smile, Blair chirped, holding her phone high. Look like you love each other. The flash went off. I blinked. I knew that photo would be online within 5 minutes with a caption about blessings and family first. We moved to the gift exchange. This was the moment I had been waiting for. I had brought gifts. I had spent money. I had bought Tanner a high-end chronograph watch. I had bought Blair a designer tote bag made of Italian leather. I had bought my parents a voucher for a luxury cruise. I watched them open the boxes. I was looking for gratitude. I was looking for surprise. I was looking for the humility that comes when someone gives you something you cannot afford to give yourself. There was none of it. Tanner opened the watch box. He looked at the brand, nodded, and slipped it onto his wrist. Nice, he said. Good weight to it. Thanks. Gee, he did not ask how much it cost. He did not look me in the eye. He accepted it as if it were his annual bonus, something contractually owed to him. Blair squealed when she saw the bag, but the squeal was thin. She immediately draped it over her shoulder and turned to the mirror. Oh, this is cute, she said. I saw an influencer with this last week. Does it come in beige? Black is fine, obviously, but beige is really in right now. My mother looked at the cruise voucher. Alaska, she asked, frowning slightly. I was hoping for the Mediterranean, but I suppose Alaska is nice. We will need to buy coats. It was a fascinating display of entitlement. They stripped the paper off thousands of dollars of generosity and did not even pause to acknowledge the labor that earned it. To them, the money was not a gift. It was a natural resource, like rain, and I was just the cloud it fell from. Dinner was a heavy affair: roast beef, mashed potatoes, and wine that Tanner drank too quickly. I sat at the end of the table, cutting my meat into precise squares, listening to the hum of their conversation. They talked about neighbors I did not know. They talked about television shows I did not watch. They did not ask me a single question. After dessert, a store-bought pie that Diane had transferred to a glass dish to make it look homemade, my mother tapped her spoon against her glass. The sound was sharp and fragile. All right, Diane said, smiling a smile that did not reach her eyes. Since we are all here, and it is the season of giving, I wanted to have a little family meeting, just to check in on our goals for the new year. I set my fork down. Here it comes. Blair sat up straighter, looking solemn. Tanner swirled his wine, looking at the ceiling. We have had a tough year, Diane continued, her voice trembling with rehearsed emotion. Tanner's business has had some headwinds, and with the house repairs it has been a strain, but we are a family, and families hold each other up. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide, pleading, and predatory. "Grace," she said softly, "we are so proud of your success. We really are. And we were thinking, since you are in such a strong position now, maybe we could formalize how we help each other. Tanner has drawn up a structure where you could invest in the family trust, and we could use that for the essential maintenance and Leo's education. It would be a loan. Of course, mostly," Tanner cleared his throat, "it is a wealth management strategy. Grace, it lowers your tax burden. You write it off as a loss, a gift, and we manage the liquidity. It is a win-win." Blair nodded vigorously. "And it would mean I could stay home with Leo for another year. Do you know how important those bonding years are? You would be buying him a childhood." "Grace?" They looked at me, 3 faces, glowing in the firelight, waiting for the vending machine to dispense the product. I picked up my napkin. I dabbed the corners of my mouth. I folded the napkin and placed it next to my plate. "A vending machine," I said. The room went still. "What?" Blair asked, tilting her head. "A vending machine," I repeated, my voice level and conversational. "That is what you called me, isn't it? At the barbecue last month?" Blair's face went slack. The color drained out of it so fast she looked like wax. I turned to Tanner. "And you said you just had to keep me sweet. A few emojis, a few phone calls, and the tap would be open." Tanner stopped swirling his wine. He stared at the floor, his jaw working. I looked at my mother. "And you, Mom, you said I was finally useful. You said I owed you for all the years I was a lump on the sofa." Diane let out a strangled sound. "Grace, I who told you that is you, are taking it out of context." "Am I?" I asked. "What is the context? Mother, what is the context for calling your daughter a lump? What is the context for laughing about how easy it is to manipulate me?" "We were drinking," Diane said, her voice rising to a panic. "It was just talk. You know how we get. We were just blowing off steam." "You are being so sensitive. Why do you always have to ruin everything?" "I am not ruining anything," I said. "I am clarifying the terms of the contract." "It was a joke," Tanner muttered, still looking at the floor. "Can't you take a joke?" "I can," I said. "But I am not laughing, and neither are you, now that you know the punchline." I stood up. The chair scraped loud and harsh against the wood floor. "Grace, sit down," Blair hissed. Tears were already forming in her eyes, summoned on command. "You are scaring Leo." The baby was asleep in the other room. "I am not sitting down," I said. "I came here tonight to be sure. I wanted to see if there was any part of you that actually missed me. Not my wallet, not my usefulness. Me. The girl who used to fix your Wi-Fi. The girl who listened to you cry over high school boyfriends." I looked at them. They were not looking at me with remorse. They were looking at me with anger. They were angry that they had been caught. They were angry that the ATM was broken. "I have my answer," I said. "You did not miss me. You missed the benefits of keeping me close." I walked to the closet near the door. I took out my coat, a heavy wool trench coat that cost more than the couch they were sitting on. I buttoned it slowly. My fingers were not shaking. "Grace, don't be dramatic," Diane snapped. She stood up. Her face flushed red. "If you walk out that door, you are turning your back on your family. On Christmas." "I am turning my back on the transaction," I said. I pulled my gloves on. "Here is the new boundary. There will be no more transfers. There will be no more bill payments. Do not send me invoices for the daycare. Do not send me photos of rotting wood. Do not call me for investments." "You cannot do that," Tanner said, standing up now, his fists clenched. "We made plans based on that capital." "Make new plans," I said. "Grace, please," Blair sobbed, the tears flowing freely now. "Think about Leo. You are punishing a baby." "I am not punishing anyone," I said. "I am simply retiring from my position as the family sponsor. You are all capable adults. Figure it out." I opened the heavy front door. The cold night air rushed in, biting and clean. It smelled of pine and frozen water. "If you walk out," Diane shouted, her voice cracking, "don't you dare think you can come crawling back when you are lonely. No one will love you like we do." I looked back at them one last time. The tableau of the happy family had dissolved. They looked ugly. They looked small. "I know," I said, "and that is the best news I have heard all year." I stepped out and closed the door. The sound of the latch clicking shut was the most satisfying sound I had ever heard. A car was idling in the driveway, the exhaust puffing white clouds into the dark air. It was a vintage Buick, pristine and tank-like. The passenger door opened. "Get in," Grandma Evelyn said. I slid into the seat. The heater was blasting. Evelyn was behind the wheel, wearing a fur coat and driving gloves. She did not look at the house. She looked at me. "Did you do it?" she asked. "I did," I said. "Did they cry?" Blair did. "Did they beg?" Diane did. "Did they apologize?" I looked at the house. The lights were still on. I could see shadows moving frantically behind the curtains. "No," I said. "They threatened." Evelyn nodded. She put the car in gear. "Predictable. Let's go. I have a bottle of expensive bourbon at my house, and I do not intend to drink it alone." We drove away. I watched the cabin disappear in the rearview mirror. I expected to feel grief. I expected to feel the tearing pain of severance, but I felt nothing, just the hum of the engine and the warmth of the heater. The next day, I waited for the explosion. I waited for the nasty texts, the guilt-tripping voicemails, the flying monkeys of extended cousins calling to tell me I was ungrateful. But the explosion never came. There were no texts. There were no calls. I checked Facebook. Blair had blocked me. Diane had blocked me. Tanner had blocked me. They had scrubbed me from their digital lives. Photos of me were gone. Tags were removed. It was as if I had never existed. It was a gut punch, sharp and breathless. I realized then that their rage was not loud. Their rage was erasure. If I was not paying, I was not real. I sat in Grandma Evelyn's kitchen, staring at my phone. "They deleted me," I said quietly. Evelyn poured coffee into a china cup. "Of course they did," she said. "You stopped playing the part. They had to write you out of the script to keep the show going." She set the cup down in front of me. "Drink up," she said. "You are a ghost now, Grace, and ghosts can do whatever the hell they want." For the first 3 weeks of January, silence was my favorite sound. I was back in Seattle, and my life had returned to its factory settings. I woke up at 5 in the morning. I ran 6 miles along the wet gray waterfront with Miller. I drank black coffee. I went to the Black Cinder offices, where the only crises I had to deal with were data breaches and ransomware attacks, problems that had logical solutions and did not try to guilt-trip me about their childhoods. I felt lighter. The heaviness of the holiday season, that suffocating pressure of being the family bank, had lifted. I had been erased from their social media, blocked on their phones, and scrubbed from their narrative. It hurt, in a phantom limb sort of way, but the wound was clean. It was cauterized. I told myself it was over. I told myself they had moved on to a new host, a new victim, or perhaps they were actually forced to get jobs. I did not care. I was free. Then came the email. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, flagged as external. It was from a headhunter I had worked with years ago, a man named Marcus who specialized in placing C-suite executives in cybersecurity firms. Subject: congrats on the new venture. Hi Grace, I just saw the announcement for Wallace Bay Advisory. Bold move stepping out on your own, especially with family. The legacy security angle is smart branding. Let me know if you need help staffing up the analyst team. I have some great candidates looking for startup energy. Best, Marcus. I stared at the screen. My coffee cup hovered halfway to my mouth. Wallace Bay Advisory, I had never heard of it. I had not stepped out on my own. I was currently leading a forensic audit for a shipping conglomerate that paid my firm $2 million a year. I was not a startup founder. My stomach did a slow, sickening roll. It was the specific physical sensation of realizing you are looking at a phishing link you just clicked. I opened a new tab. I typed the name into the search bar. Wallace Bay Advisory. The first result was a sponsored ad. Wallace Bay Advisory Enterprise Security, rooted in trust. I clicked the link. The website was slick. It was not a cheap, do-it-yourself template. It was polished, professional, and terrifyingly competent. The color scheme was navy and gold colors that screamed old money and stability. There were stock photos of glass buildings, handshakes, and binary code flowing like a river. And there, on the Our Team page, was my face. It was my professional headshot from the Black Cinder website, the one I had paid $500 to have taken. I looked sharp, competent, and serious. Underneath my photo, the text read, Grace Wallace, Founding Partner Chief Strategy Officer, with over a decade of experience leading forensic risk teams for top-tier global firms. Grace brings institutional-grade security to the family enterprise sector. A pioneer in digital fraud prevention, she leads the Wallace Bay team with a focus on integrity and legacy protection. I scrolled down. Next to me was a photo of Tanner. He was wearing a suit I had never seen him wear, probably Photoshop, and his title was Managing Director of Operations. Next to him was Blair. Her title was Director of Client Relations. The bio for the company claimed it was a multi-generational firm with deep roots in asset protection. It was a lie. It was a hallucination. But to an outsider, to a potential client, it looked real. It looked legitimate. They had not just stolen my money. They were stealing my resume. My hands started to shake. This was not just a family dispute anymore. This was professional suicide. If my current employer saw this, they would fire me immediately. You cannot be a director at a major risk firm while secretly running a side advisory business. It is a direct conflict of interest. It is a fireable offense. It creates liability. I grabbed my phone. I did not think. I reacted. I dialed the number listed on the Contact Us page. It was a Charleston area code. It rang twice. Wallace Bay Advisory. This is Tanner speaking. How can we secure your future today? His voice was smooth, rehearsed. He sounded like a CEO. He sounded like he believed it. Tanner, I said. My voice was ice. There was a pause, a sharp intake of breath. The smooth corporate mask slipped instantly. Grace. He sounded panicked. Don't hang up. Wait, how did you get this number? It is on the website, I said. The website where you list me as a founding partner. Take it down, now. Whoa, slow down, Tanner said, his voice shifting from panic to a slimy, defensive charm. Grace, listen, it is just a landing page. We are A/B testing some branding. It is not live. We are just seeing what kind of traffic we can pull. You are using my name, I said. You are using my photo. You are using my credentials to sell what exactly? What are you selling? Tanner. You do not know the first thing about enterprise security. You think blockchain is a type of jewelry. I am the ops guy, Tanner argued. You are the face. That is the synergy. Grace, you have the credibility. I have the drive. We needed a foot in the door. People trust the name Wallace because of you. We are just leveraging that asset. It is smart business. It is fraud, I said. It is impersonation, and it is going to get me fired. Oh, relax, he scoffed. Your boss isn't checking startup domains in South Carolina. We are just trying to build something here. Grace, we are trying to feed your nephew. Why do you have to be such a crab in a bucket? You are already at the top. Let us climb up your rope. I am not a rope, I said. I am a liability risk, and you are creating a massive one. We are keeping the lights on, Tanner shouted, losing his composure. Do you know what the mortgage is? Do you know what the interest rates are? We needed a hook. You are the hook. Stop being selfish and let us use the name. It does not cost you a dime. It costs me my reputation, I said. Grace, please. It was Blair. She must have been listening on speakerphone. Her voice was shrill, desperate, jagged with tears. Grace, please don't report us. We have a lead, a real lead, a logistics company in Savannah. They are interested. If we land this, we are set. We can pay off the debts. We can fix the car. Just let it ride for 2 weeks. Please, for the baby. You are pitching a logistics company, I asked. The blood drained from my face. Blair, what are you pitching them? Who is going to do the work? Who is going to audit their security? We figured we would outsource it, Blair stammered. Or, well, we thought maybe you could just look at the files, like, on the weekend, just to give us notes. I closed my eyes. They were insane. They were genuinely, clinically delusional. They thought high-level cybersecurity consulting was something I could do on the weekend, like baking cookies. You are selling a service you cannot provide, I said, using my license to do it. Do you understand that is a crime that is actual fraud? You don't understand how much your name is worth, Blair screamed. It was a raw, ugly sound. We sent out emails with your name on them and people actually replied. They took the meetings. You have this magic key, and you won't even let us hold it for 5 minutes. My name is not a key, I said. It is my life, and I am not letting you wreck it. If you shut this down, Tanner threatened, his voice dropping low, I will go on social media. I will tell everyone you abandoned your family. I will tell them you are unstable. I will torch your reputation anyway. Go ahead, I said. But take the site down, or I will take it down for you. I hung up. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. I stood up and paced my office. I needed to think. I needed to assess the damage. I checked my email again. There was another new message. This one was not from a recruiter. It was from a contact at a mid-sized bank in Charlotte, a former client of mine. Subject: quick question regarding the proposal. Hi, Grace. Hope you are well. We received a bid this morning from a group called Wallace Bay Advisory for our Q1 audit. The proposal language looks almost identical to the framework you built for us at Black Cinder 2 years ago. I saw your name on the deck, so I assumed this is a new side project for you. Just wanted to confirm before I forward it to compliance, as the pricing is significantly lower than your standard rate. Let me know. Sarah. The room spun. They had not just set up a website. They had stolen my old work product, probably files I had left on a shared family drive years ago to print. Or perhaps they had found an old hard drive in my childhood bedroom, and they were using it to undercut my current industry. They were copying and pasting my intellectual property and selling it at a discount. If Sarah forwarded that to compliance without my explanation, I would be done. I would be flagged for double dealing. I would be sued for breach of contract. I would be blacklisted from the industry. This was not a family squabble. This was a hostile act. I did not scream. I did not cry. I went into survival mode. I picked up my phone and dialed a number I had hoped never to use for personal reasons. Hello? This is Amanda Chen, legal counsel. A woman answered. Amanda, it is Grace Wallace, I said. I have a priority 1 situation. I need to report an instance of identity theft and corporate impersonation involving my credentials. It is external, but it poses a reputational risk to the firm. Okay, Grace, Amanda said, her tone shifting instantly to professional alert. Who is the bad actor? It is a shell entity operating out of South Carolina. I said, called Wallace Bay Advisory. Do you know the principals? She asked. I took a breath. This was it. This was the moment I severed the limb to save the body. Yes, I said. They are my family members, but they are acting without my consent, without my knowledge, and in direct violation of my employment agreement. I am sending you the documentation now. I need a cease and desist issued immediately. Understood, Amanda said. Send the files. We will kill it. I hung up. I sat down at my desk. My hands were steady now. I forwarded the emails. I took screenshots of the website. I downloaded the bio page where they claimed I was their partner. I attached it all to a single email addressed to my boss, the general counsel, and the head of compliance. Subject urgent. Notification of identity misuse and unauthorized business activity. I typed the body of the email. I detailed the fraud. I disavowed the company. I explicitly stated that I had no financial or operational ties to Wallace Bay Advisory. I hit send. I watched the progress bar slide across the screen. Sent. It was done. I had just launched a legal drone strike on my own brother-in-law and sister. I had just handed my family over to a team of corporate lawyers who ate fraud for breakfast. I leaned back in my chair. I felt sick. I felt terrified. But mostly, I felt the cold, hard clarity of someone who finally realizes that the only way to win a game against cheaters is to flip the board over. My phone rang again. It was Tanner. I did not answer. I blocked the number. The game was over. Now, the trial would begin. The legal machinery of a corporate cease and desist order is usually sufficient to crush a small-time amateur operation. It is a heavy, terrifying document, laden with statutes and threats of financial ruin. When my attorney, Amanda, sent the courier to the house in South Carolina, I expected it to be the end. I expected Tanner to panic, Blair to cry, and the website to dissolve into a 404 error page before the courier had even returned to his van. For 48 hours, that is exactly what happened. The domain Wallace Bay Advisory went dark. The email addresses bounced. I sat in my office in Seattle, watching the digital silence, feeling a grim sense of closure. I assumed they had retreated to lick their wounds and perhaps, finally, apply for legitimate employment. I was wrong. I had underestimated their desperation. And worse, I had underestimated their capacity for deceit. 3 days later, my internal alert system triggered a notification. A new domain had been registered, https://google.com/searchq=w ba-strategic.com. I clicked the link. The page loaded with the same stock photos, the same navy and gold color scheme, and the same stolen biography. They had simply migrated the entire site to a new host, changed a few words. Founding partner was now senior technical advisor, and relaunched. They were not stopping. They were pivoting. I felt a cold shiver of realization run down my spine. This was not a mistake. This was a campaign. They had decided that the potential payout from defrauding a client outweighed the risk of my legal threats. They were gambling that I would not actually sue my own family. They were banking on my guilt being stronger than my sense of self-preservation. But the real escalation happened the following Tuesday. I received a notification from a credit monitoring service. I subscribed to a service that flags not just credit checks, but identity verification pings. It alerted me to a hard inquiry from a commercial equipment leasing firm in Atlanta. I called the leasing firm immediately. I navigated through 3 layers of automated menus until I reached a human being in the underwriting department. "I am calling about an application under the name Grace Wallace," I said, my voice steady. I received an alert, but I did not apply for any equipment. The underwriter typed for a moment. "I see the application here. Ms. Wallace, it is for a lease on 3 high-capacity servers and a suite of office hardware. It is signed by you. Digital signature via DocuSign." "I did not sign it," I said. "Can you send me the metadata on the signature?" "I cannot release that without a fraud affidavit," she said. "I will send the affidavit within the hour," I replied. "But tell me one thing. What email address was used to verify the signature?" "It lists operations at wba-strategic.com. I hung up. I did not scream. I did not throw my phone. I went into a state of hyper-focus. This was no longer just a trademark dispute or a misuse of likeness. This was wire fraud. This was forgery. This was a felony. They had forged my signature to lease hardware they could not pay for, knowing that when they defaulted, the debt collectors would come for me, not them. They were not just using my name to open doors. They were using my credit history as a shield to loot the room. I called Amanda. "They did not stop," I said. "They escalated. I have evidence of attempted credit fraud." "Okay," Amanda said, her tone shifting from advisory to combat ready. We file the lawsuit today. We freeze them out. No, I said. The word surprised me. But as soon as I said it, I knew it was the right strategic move. If we sued now, they would claim it was a misunderstanding. They would claim I had verbally authorized it and then changed my mind. It would be a messy, he said, she said family drama in civil court. I do not want a civil suit, I said. I want indisputable proof of criminal intent. I want to catch them selling a product that does not exist, using an identity that is not theirs. You want a sting, Amanda said. I want a sting, I confirmed. We hired a corporate investigator named Vance. Vance was a former forensic accountant with the personality of a concrete block and the investigative skills of a bloodhound. He did not care about the emotional nuances of family dynamics. He cared about the chain of evidence. Together, we built the trap. We created a fictional entity called Highland Creek Partners. We built a landing page that looked like a boutique private equity firm looking for undervalued assets in the legacy security sector. We gave it a virtual office address in Delaware and a phone number that routed directly to Vance's recording software. Then, Vance sent the email. Subject Investment Inquiry. WBA. Strategic. Dear Mr. Wallace, our analysts came across your firm's profile during a recent sweep of the Southeast regional market. We are intrigued by your family-led approach to enterprise security, particularly the involvement of Grace Wallace, whose work in forensic risk we have followed for some time. We are looking to deploy capital into high-growth firms in your sector. We would welcome a preliminary conversation to discuss your current capital needs and operational roadmap. Regards, Elias Thorne, Senior Partner, Highland Creek. It was the perfect bait. It appealed to Tanner's greed and his ego. It validated his delusion that he was a player in the high-stakes world of finance. They bit within 20 minutes. Tanner replied, using an abundance of corporate buzzwords, agreeing to a call the following morning at 10 o'clock. At 9:55 the next day, I sat in Vance's office in downtown Seattle. The room was soundproofed. A large monitor displayed the audio waveform of the incoming line. I put on a headset and pressed the mute button. Remember, Vance said, adjusting his own headset. You do not make a sound, no matter what they say. I am Elias Thorne. You are a ghost. The phone rang. Vance answered. Elias Thorne speaking. Mr. Thorne, Tanner's voice boomed through the speakers. He sounded manic, high on adrenaline. Tanner Wallace here. Great to connect. Really appreciate you reaching out. The pleasure is mine, Vance said, his voice smooth and professional. I have reviewed your materials. Impressive scope. I see you are positioning yourself as a competitor to the major risk firms. Exactly, Tanner said. We are disrupting the model. We are nimble. We don't have the bloat of the big guys, but we have the intellectual property. That is our edge. And your partner, Vance said. Grace Wallace. Her credentials are quite significant. Is she on the call today? My heart hammered against my ribs. Ah, Grace, Tanner said, letting out a practiced, casual laugh. She is actually tied up in a deep-dive technical audit this morning. You know how she is? Heads down in the code. She leaves the business development to me. But she is fully on board. I actually built the framework she uses. She is the technician, but I am the architect, if that makes sense. I gripped the edge of the desk. I am the architect. The audacity was breathtaking. Tanner could not configure a home router, yet he was claiming ownership of forensic algorithms I had spent 10 years refining. I see, Vance said. So she is an active partner. We would require her sign-off on any equity deal. 100%? Tanner lied. She trusts my judgment implicitly. We are in lockstep. Family, right? The trust is built in. Suddenly, there was a noise on the line, a door opening. Hi, a female voice chimed in. It was Blair. Ah, and here is our Director of Client Relations, Tanner said, recovering quickly. My wife, Blair. So nice to meet you. Elias, Blair said. She was using her party voice, breathless, charming, slightly flirtatious. It was the voice she used to get better tables at restaurants. I just wanted to pop in and say how excited we are. We have been looking for the right partner to help us grow. We are very protective of our culture. You know, it is a family business. Family is important, Vance agreed. So, let's talk numbers. Highland Creek is prepared to offer an initial seed round of $150,000. Pending a due diligence check, I heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end. $150,000. To them, it must have sounded like millions. That aligns with our valuation, Tanner said, trying to sound bored. We could work with that. Excellent, Vance said. To expedite the process, we would need to send a good faith retainer to secure the exclusivity period, usually $5,000. Do you have a business account capable of receiving wire transfers? Yes, Tanner said immediately. We do. I can email you the routing instructions right now. Please do, Vance said. A moment later, an email pinged on Vance's laptop. He opened the PDF attachment. I leaned in. The document was a voided check for a bank account at a regional credit union. The name on the account was Grace Wallace Consulting, LLC. I froze. I did not have an account at that credit union. I did not have an LLC with that name. Vance muted the call. He looked at me. Is this yours? I shook my head. No. Vance unmuted. I see the account is in Ms. Wallace's name. Just for our compliance. She is the sole signatory. She is, Tanner said, but I have power of attorney on the account for operational expenses. It is all standard. Understood, Vance said. We will process the paperwork and be in touch within 24 hours. Great, Blair chirped. We are so looking forward to this journey with you. Vance hung up. The room was silent. The audio waveform flattened into a straight line. Okay, Vance said, turning to his computer. Let's see what we have. He ran the routing number and the account details through a database used by investigators to trace asset fraud. It took 3 minutes. Here it is, Vance said, pointing to the screen. Account opened 6 days ago. Online application. ID verification used. He clicked a file. An image popped up. It was my driver's license. But it was not my current license. It was my license from 4 years ago. The one I had lost during a visit to South Carolina. I had assumed I dropped it at a gas station. They didn't find it, I whispered. They kept it. Vance kept scrolling. Social Security number matches. Address listed is a P.O. box in Charleston. They used your identity to incorporate a shell company and open a bank account. They are not just pretending to work with you, Grace. They are pretending to be you. He turned the monitor toward me. They have created a synthetic identity, Vance said. His voice clinical. They took your credentials, your history, and your good name, and they built a costume. Tanner puts it on to sign checks. Blair puts it on to charm clients. They have hollowed you out and climbed inside the skin. I stared at the screen. I looked at the voided check with my name printed in bold. Black letters. It was a violation so profound it made me feel physically ill. They had not just stolen money. Money is renewable. They had stolen my agency. They had stolen the reputation I had built hour by hour, year by year, in cold server rooms and high-pressure boardrooms. They were wearing my life like a stolen coat, stretching the seams, staining it with their incompetence and their greed. What do we do? I asked. Vance leaned back in his chair. Well, we have the recording of them claiming ownership of the IP. We have the email sending the fraudulent banking details. We have the proof of the account opened with stolen ID. This is no longer a civil matter. Grace, this is federal bank fraud, identity theft, wire fraud. He looked at me. I can package this up and send it to the FBI Cyber Division this afternoon, or we can send it to the local district attorney in Charleston. Either way, once I hit send, there is no unringing the bell. They will be arrested. I looked at the waveform on the screen. I imagined Tanner's smug face as he bragged about being the architect. I imagined Blair's fake charm as she sold a version of me that did not exist. I thought about the lump on the sofa. I thought about the tech helper. They had spent 30 years ignoring the real Grace. Now, they were going to prison for trying to be the fake one. Package it, I said, But do not send it to the FBI yet. No, Vance asked. No, I said. Send it to their inbox first. I want them to see the trap snap shut before the cage locks. You want a confrontation, Vance noted. No, I said, standing up and smoothing my blazer. I want a surrender. I want them to know exactly who ended them. I want them to know that the background noise finally got loud enough to shatter the glass. Prepare the files, I told him. I am going to make a call. Before the legal war truly began, there was a quiet, suffocating prelude in the waiting room of a Charleston hospital. The call had come not from my mother, but from Grandma Evelyn's neighbor, a retired nurse named Mrs. Higgins. She told me Evelyn had suffered a spell, a localized term for a transient ischemic attack. It was not fatal, but it was a warning shot fired across the bow of an 80-year-old vessel. I flew down immediately. I did not tell my team at Black Cinder why I was leaving. I simply marked my calendar as unavailable. I did not tell my family I was coming. I knew they would be there, not because they were worried about Evelyn's heart, but because they were worried about the contents of her safe deposit box. When I arrived at the hospital room, the tableau was exactly as I had predicted. Evelyn was sitting up in bed, looking small against the white pillows. An IV line taped to her bruised hand. She looked tired, her skin like crumpled parchment, but her eyes were open and alert. Hovering around the bed were Diane and Blair. They were performing a scene of intense medical advocacy. Diane was fluffing a pillow that did not need fluffing. Blair was holding a cup of ice chips like it was a holy grail. Mom, you really need to rest, Diane was saying. Her voice pitched in that breathless, anxious tone she used when she wanted something. We are just so worried about your stress levels. Managing that big house, it is too much. We need to talk about simplifying. Simplifying. It was a soft word for a hard action liquidation. I am fine, Diane, Evelyn rasped. Stop fussing. You are sucking the oxygen out of the room. Then she saw me standing in the doorway. Grace, Evelyn said. Her face did not soften. She was not a soft woman, but her shoulders dropped about an inch. You made good time. Diane and Blair spun around. Their expressions were a mixture of shock and territorial aggression. Grace, Diane said, we didn't know you were coming. I thought you were busy with your new ventures. She said new ventures with a heavy, sarcastic emphasis, referencing the fake company they had built using my name. They still did not know that I knew. They did not know about the investigator, the recorded call, or the file sitting on my laptop that could send them to federal prison. They thought they were still playing a game I was unaware of. I am never too busy for this, I said. I walked past them to the bedside. I took Evelyn's hand. It felt cold and dry, like autumn leaves. How are you feeling, Grandma? Like a car that needs a new transmission, she grunted. But the engine is still running. The doctor said she needs absolute quiet, Blair interjected, stepping close to me. She does not need any drama. Grace, so if you are here to cause a scene about the holidays, I am here to ensure she is comfortable, I said, not looking at Blair, and to make sure her wishes are followed. We know her wishes, Diane snapped. We have been here the whole time. We are the ones taking care of her. Evelyn pulled her hand away from mine and slapped it lightly against the mattress. Enough, she said. Her voice was weak, but the command was absolute. Diane, Blair, go to the cafeteria. Get some coffee. I want to speak to Grace alone. Mother, I do not think that is wise, Diane argued. Your blood pressure. Go, Evelyn said. She pointed a shaking finger at the door. Diane pursed her lips. She looked at Blair, then at me. We will be right outside. 5 minutes. Grace, do not upset her. They left. The door clicked shut. But I knew they were standing right on the other side, pressing their ears against the wood. Evelyn let out a long sigh and closed her eyes for a moment. Vultures, she whispered, waiting for the carcass to cool. They are scared, I said. They are broke. That makes them dangerous, Evelyn said. She opened her eyes and looked at me. Grace, reach into my purse, the brown leather one in the closet. There is a blue folder. Get it. I retrieved the folder. It was thick, held together by a rubber band. For 10 years, Evelyn said. I have watched them. I have watched them bleed your father dry. I have watched them treat you like hired help. And I knew this day would come, the day I got too old to guard the gate. She pointed to the folder. That is the map. Grace, I drew it a long time ago. Now you have to walk it. What is this? I asked. My estate plan, she said. The real one, not the one Diane thinks exists. Yesterday, before the stroke, I signed the final addendums. It creates a trust. The house, the investments, the land, it all goes into a locked structure. It is designed to pay for education, medical emergencies, and legitimate business loans vetted by a third party. It does not pay for lifestyle. It does not pay for gambling debts, and it certainly does not pay for leased luxury cars. She took a breath, wheezing slightly. I need an executor. Grace, I need someone who holds the keys, someone who cannot be bought, someone who does not confuse love with a transaction. She looked at me, her gaze piercing. I named you, she said. You are the executor, and you are my medical power of attorney, effective immediately. I felt the weight of the folder in my hands. It was not just paper, it was a declaration of war. By naming me, she was cutting off the supply line to the rest of the family. She was putting me in charge of the one thing they worshiped, the money. They are going to hate me, I said. They already hate you, Evelyn replied. Because you remind them of what they are not, competent. I can do it, I said. Good, Evelyn said. Because inside that folder is something else, something personal. I want you to read it later, not here. When you are alone, it explains a lot. Grace. The door burst open. Diane marched in, her face flushed. Time is up. The nurse said visiting hours are strict. She looked at the folder in my hands. Her eyes narrowed. What is that? Diane asked. Paperwork, I said. Grandma wanted me to review some insurance forms. I can handle that, Diane said, reaching out a hand. Give it to me. No, Evelyn said from the bed. Grace handles the paperwork now. All of it. Diane froze. What does that mean? It means, I said, standing up and placing the folder into my tote bag, that I am the executor of her estate and her medical power of attorney. If you have questions about her care or her assets, you direct them to me. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed but not yet detonated. You, Diane whispered, you manipulated her. You came down here while she was medicated, and you forced her to sign something. I have been planning this for 5 years. Diane, Evelyn said. Grace just found out 5 minutes ago. Diane turned to me. The mask of the concerned mother fell away completely. Underneath was pure, unadulterated venom. You think you can come in here and steal our inheritance, she hissed. You think because you have some fancy job in Seattle you are better than us? This is my mother. This is my money. It is Grandma's money, I corrected. And right now, her only concern is getting better. So I am going to ask you to leave. You are upsetting the patient. Diane looked like she was going to lunge at me, but Blair grabbed her arm. Mom, Blair said, her voice tight. Not here. People are watching. Diane straightened her jacket. She looked at me with a hatred so cold it made the air conditioner feel warm. This isn't over. Grace, she said. You want to fight? You have got one. They stormed out. I stayed with Evelyn until she fell asleep. Then, I drove to her house, the empty, quiet house on the marsh, and sat in her study. I opened the folder. The legal documents were there. Crisp and ironclad. The trust was exactly as she had described. It was a fortress. But in the back of the folder, behind the wills and the deeds, was a smaller envelope. On the front, in Evelyn's shaky handwriting, was written, "For Grace," the receipt. I opened it. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It was a handwritten contract, dated 25 years ago. I recognized the handwriting immediately. It was my mother's, and underneath it was a photocopy of a canceled check for $15,000. I read the letter. I, Diane Wallace, agree to accept the sum of $15,000 from Evelyn Wallace to cover the credit card debts accrued by Tanner and myself. In exchange for this financial assistance, I agree to cease the disparagement of my daughter. Grace, I agree to include her in family activities and to stop comparing her negatively to her sister. I acknowledge that my treatment of her has been unfair and damaging. Signed, Diane Wallace, June 12, 2001. I stared at the paper. The date, 2001. I was a teenager then. I remembered that year. I remembered it vividly. It was the year my mother suddenly stopped criticizing my clothes for a few months. It was the year she let me go to computer camp without making a joke about it. I had thought, at the time, that she had finally seen me. I thought she had finally realized I was worthy of love, but she hadn't. She had been paid. My grandmother had bribed my mother to be kind to me. She had paid off her debt in exchange for a few months of basic maternal decency, and as soon as the money was spent, the kindness had evaporated. I put the paper down on the desk. My hands were trembling. All these years, I had thought the problem was me. I thought I was too quiet, too awkward, too unlovable. I thought if I just tried harder, if I just earned more, if I just fixed enough things, she would love me. But it was never about me. It was always about the transaction. My mother was not just a narcissist. She was a mercenary. Her affection was a service she sold to the highest bidder. I felt a tear slide down my cheek. Just one. It was hot and angry. I was not sad. I was furious. I was furious for the little girl who had tried so hard. I was furious for the woman who had written checks to buy a love that was never real. "Okay," I whispered to the empty room. "Okay." I put the letter back in the folder. I added it to the stack of evidence I had been collecting. The fraud, the identity theft, and now, the emotional blackmail. I had everything I needed to destroy them, not just legally, but morally. I could expose them for exactly what they were. The doorbell rang. It was late. The sun had gone down hours ago. I walked to the door. I looked through the peephole. It was a courier. Not the same one from Seattle. This was a local process server. I opened the door. "Grace Wallace?" he asked. "Yes." "You have been served." He handed me a thick envelope and walked away. I closed the door and opened the package under the hall light. It was a motion filed in the Charleston County Probate Court. In re the estate of Evelyn Wallace. Petition for emergency guardianship and conservatorship. Petitioners, Diane Wallace and Blair Wallace. Respondent Evelyn Wallace. I skimmed the legal jargon. They were claiming that Evelyn was mentally incompetent. They cited her erratic behavior in changing her will. They claimed she was being unduly influenced and isolated by an estranged family member, me. They were asking the court to strip Evelyn of her rights. They were asking the court to nullify the power of attorney she had just signed. They were asking to be named her legal guardians, which would give them total control over her body and her money. And there was a supporting affidavit attached. It was signed by Tanner. It claimed that I, Grace Wallace, had a history of instability and financial manipulation. It claimed that I had threatened family members and that my sudden arrival was a calculated attempt to seize assets. They were projecting. They were taking their own crimes and painting them onto me. I looked at the signature at the bottom, Tanner's signature. I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. "People will believe what they want," Tanner had said. He was right, but people also believe evidence. And tomorrow, in court, I was not just going to defend my grandmother. I was going to introduce the court to the real Tanner Wallace. I picked up my phone. I dialed Vance, the investigator. "It is time," I said. "Did they take the bait?" Vance asked. "No," I said. "They declared war. They just filed for guardianship of my grandmother. They are trying to have her declared insane so they can loot the estate." Vance let out a low whistle. "That is bold. Stupid, but bold." I need the full file, I said. Everything. The bank fraud, the identity theft, the recordings, and I need it overnighted to Charleston. I am going to court tomorrow. You got it, Vance said. Do you want me to call the FBI now? No, I said. Not yet. I want to look them in the eye when I drop the hammer. I want them to be sitting in that courtroom, thinking they have won, thinking they have finally outsmarted the quiet one. I looked at the letter from my grandmother, the receipt. Bring the file, I said. I have one more piece of evidence to add. I hung up. I stood in the center of the house that my family wanted to strip for parts. I felt the ghosts of my childhood watching me. The lonely little girl, the hopeful teenager, the background noise. They were all gone. The only thing left was the executor, and I was about to execute judgment. The hearing took place on a Tuesday morning in a small, windowless conference room at the Charleston County Probate Court. It was not the dramatic, wood-paneled courtroom of television dramas. It was a sterile room with fluorescent lights that hummed like trapped insects and a long table that smelled faintly of lemon furniture polish. My family arrived early. They had clearly coordinated their costumes for the performance. Blair was wearing a modest black dress and a cardigan, her hair pulled back in a loose, tragic bun. She looked like a grieving heroine in a Victorian novel, a woman crushed by the burden of caring for an ailing matriarch. Tanner wore a navy suit that was slightly too shiny, checking his watch every 30 seconds to project the image of a busy executive inconvenienced by this formality. My mother, Diane, sat between them, clutching a tissue she had not yet used, radiating a vibrating, nervous energy when I walked in, flanked by my attorney, Amanda, and the investigator, Vance. The atmosphere in the room shifted. It became heavy. Tanner looked up. He did not look at me. He looked at the thick banker's box Vance was carrying. I saw a flicker of genuine unease cross his face, but he smoothed it over with a smirk. He leaned over and whispered something to Blair. She didn't respond. She was too busy staring at me with wet, wounded eyes, already in character. We sat on the opposite side of the table. The lines were drawn. The mediator, a retired judge named Mr. Henderson, entered. He was a man who had seen enough family disputes to know that the truth usually lay somewhere in the middle. He adjusted his glasses and looked at the petition. "We are here regarding the emergency guardianship of Evelyn Wallace," Henderson said, his voice gravelly. "The petitioners allege that Ms. Wallace is incapacitated and that the current power of attorney, Grace Wallace, is acting against the estate's best interests." Their lawyer, a local man with a cheap suit and a loud voice, stood up. He launched into a prepared speech about Evelyn's cognitive decline, her vulnerability, and how my sudden arrival was a predatory act designed to isolate a confused old woman from her loving family. "Grace Wallace has been absent for years," the lawyer declared, pointing a finger at me. "She returns only when her grandmother's health fails, brandishing documents signed under duress. Meanwhile, Diane and Blair Wallace have been the daily caretakers, the ones changing the sheets and holding the hands." Blair let out a soft, perfectly timed sob. Diane patted her arm. It was a good performance. If I did not know the truth, I might have believed them when it was our turn. Amanda did not make a speech. She simply nodded to me. I stood up. I did not look at the mediator. I looked at Tanner. "Your Honor," I said, addressing the mediator, "we are not here to debate my grandmother's health. We are here to debate the petitioner's motivation, and I have evidence that suggests this petition has nothing to do with care, and everything to do with a crime." Tanner scoffed loud enough to be heard. "Objection. That is slander." "It is not slander if it is documented," I said calmly. I reached into the box. I pulled out a stack of papers. "Exhibit A," I said, sliding the first document across the table. A printout of a website for a company called WBA Strategic, formerly Wallace Bay Advisory. This website lists me as a founding partner. It uses my biography, my professional credentials, and my likeness. I looked at Blair. Her face went pale. I have never been a partner in this firm, I continued. I did not authorize the use of my name. In fact, I sent a cease and desist order 2 weeks ago. The site was taken down and then immediately relaunched under a new domain. This is irrelevant, their lawyer sputtered. We are here about the grandmother, not a business dispute. It goes to character, I said. And to intent. I pulled out the second document. Exhibit B, a voided check and account opening documents for a bank account in my name. The account was opened 20 days ago using a driver's license I lost in 2021. The signature on the account is forged. The contact email belongs to Tanner Wallace. Tanner shifted in his seat. The smirk was gone. He was gripping the arms of his chair. And finally, I said, signaling to Vance, Exhibit C? Vance placed a small speaker on the table. He pressed play. The room filled with the sound of the recorded call. I am the architect. Tanner's voice boomed, clear and arrogant. She is the technician. She trusts my judgment implicitly. We are in lockstep. Then Blair's voice joined in. We are so looking forward to this journey with you. And finally, the discussion of the wire transfer, the agreement to accept $150,000 into a fraudulent account. I let the recording play until the end. The silence that followed was absolute. The hum of the lights seemed to get louder. Tanner was staring at the table, his face a mask of red blotches. Blair was frozen, her mouth slightly open. Diane looked like she had been slapped. This, I said, my voice steady, is not a family dispute. This is federal wire fraud. This is identity theft. This is a criminal conspiracy to defraud investors using my professional license as bait. The reason they filed for guardianship of my grandmother is not because they are worried about her mind. It is because they are bankrupt. Their fraudulent business is failing, and they need access to her estate to pay off the debts they incurred pretending to be me. I sat down. Blair burst into tears. Real tears this time. Ugly, panicked tears. We were doing it for the family, she wailed, turning to the mediator. We just needed a start. Grace has so much, she has so much, and she wouldn't help us. We were going to pay it back. We just borrowed her name. She looked at me, her eyes pleading. Grace, how could you? We are your blood. You are trying to send us to jail. I am not trying to do anything, I said. I am just presenting the facts. You are so cold, Blair spat, the sadness turning instantly to rage. You have always been cold. You think you are better than us? You are just a lonely, bitter workaholic. We wanted you back in the family. No, I said. I looked her dead in the eye. You didn't want me back. You wanted my name with your hand on it. The mediator cleared his throat. He looked at the documents. He looked at Tanner. Mr. Wallace? The mediator said. Is that your voice on the recording? Tanner opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at his lawyer. The lawyer was busy putting his papers back in his briefcase, clearly realizing he was on the losing side of a felony case. It was a marketing strategy, Tanner stammered. It was branding. It was fraud, the mediator corrected. Then, a voice spoke from the corner of the room, a voice that had been silent until now. It was theft, Grandma Evelyn said. Everyone turned. Evelyn was sitting in her wheelchair. She had been quiet, observing, her eyes moving from face to face. Now, she sat up. She did not look confused. She did not look frail. She looked like a judge. Grandma, Diane started, her voice trembling. We were just... Be quiet, Diane, Evelyn said. She did not shout. She simply cut the air with her voice. I have listened to you lie for 40 years. I am done listening. She turned to the mediator. My mind is sound, Evelyn said clearly. I can name the president. I can name the year. I can tell you the current stock price of Apple. And I can tell you that my daughter and her family have treated me like an ATM since 1985. She pointed a shaking finger at the table. They want guardianship because I closed the tap. Evelyn said, I created a trust. Grace is the executor, and they are terrified because they know Grace cannot be bullied. She looked at me. There was no warmth in her look, but there was respect, a soldier acknowledging another soldier. "Show them the terms, Grace," Evelyn said. I opened the binder again. I took out the summary of the new trust. "The Evelyn Wallace Family Trust," I read. "Effective immediately. All liquid assets and real estate holdings are transferred into the trust. The trust is managed by an independent fiduciary. There are no cash distributions to family members. None." Diane let out a small gasp. "However," I continued, "the trust will pay directly for approved services. It will pay for drug and alcohol rehabilitation. It will pay for financial literacy courses. It will pay for vocational training and higher education. It will pay for family therapy." I looked up at them. "If you want money," I said, "you have to submit an invoice for self-improvement. If you want to go to rehab, we pay. If you want to go to college, we pay. But if you want a new car, no. If you want a renovation, no. If you want to pretend to be rich, no." "This is cruel," Tanner whispered. "You are cutting us off." "We are saving you," I said. "Or at least, we are stopping you from drowning us with you." The mediator closed the file. "Petition denied," he said. "Ms. Evelyn Wallace is clearly competent. The power of attorney stands." He looked at Tanner and Blair. "As for the evidence of fraud presented here, I am obligated to refer this to the district attorney's office. However, Ms. Grace Wallace has indicated she might be willing to withhold the filing of federal charges pending a restitution agreement." Tanner looked at me. He looked smaller than I had ever seen him. The bluster was gone. The architect had collapsed. "What do you want?" Tanner asked. "I want the website down today," I said. "I want a formal confession signed and notarized, admitting to the identity theft, which I will keep in a safe. If you ever try to use my name again, I send it to the FBI, and I want a no-contact order. You do not call me, you do not email me, you do not speak my name." "And the money?" Tanner asked. "The money we owe on the servers." "You figure it out," I said. "Get a job. Sell the car, sell the house. I don't care, but if debt collectors call me, the deal is off." Tanner nodded slowly. He picked up a pen. His hand was shaking so badly he could barely sign the paper Amanda slid in front of him. Blair did not sign. She just sat there, staring at her hands. The perfect life she had curated on Instagram was over. The leased cars would be repossessed. The house would likely be sold. She would have to live a real life now, one without an audience, and the terror of that reality was written all over her face. Diane stood up. She looked at Evelyn. "Mother," she said, her voice breaking, "how can you do this? We are your family." Evelyn looked at her daughter. She looked at the woman who had taken a $15,000 bribe to be a mother. "You are my relatives," Evelyn said. "Grace is my family." We left them in that room. We did not look back. I wheeled Evelyn out to the parking lot. The sun was shining, bright and harsh. The air smelled of salt and exhaust. "Well," Evelyn said, adjusting her blanket, "that was efficient." "Are you okay?" I asked. "I am tired," she said, "but I will sleep well tonight, for the first time in years." She reached up and patted my hand. It was an awkward gesture. We were not huggers. We were survivors. "Go back to Seattle. Grace," she said, "you do not belong here. You never did. That was your tragedy. But it was also your saving grace." "What will you do?" I asked. "I will live," she said. "I have Mrs. Higgins, I have the nurses, and I have the peace of knowing they cannot touch me." I flew home that night. I landed in Seattle at 11 o'clock. It was raining. Of course, a steady, rhythmic drizzle that washed the dust of the South off the plain. I took a cab to my condo. I walked into the quiet lobby. I took the elevator to the top floor. I opened the door. Miller was waiting for me. He uncurled himself from the sofa, his long legs stretching, his tail offering a slow, rhythmic thump against the cushions. I dropped my bag. I took off my blazer. I sat down on the floor next to him. He rested his head on my shoulder. I buried my face in his neck, smelling the scent of dog and wool and home. I looked out the window. The city was a grid of lights reflected in the black water of Elliott Bay. The ferries were moving in the distance, silent and steady. I thought about Blair, crying in the conference room. I thought about Tanner's shaking hand. I thought about the silence of my phone, which would never again light up with a request for money disguised as love. I did not feel triumphant. Revenge is not a victory. It is just a correction of the ledger. It is balancing the books. But as I sat there, listening to the rain hit the glass, I realized I felt something else. I felt light. For 33 years, I had been carrying the weight of their expectations. I had been carrying the hope that if I just gave enough, fixed enough, and disappeared enough, they would finally see me. I had put that weight down. I was alone in the room, but for the first time in my life, I was not lonely. I was just present. I closed my eyes. I listened to the silence. It didn't sound like emptiness anymore. It sounded like peace, because I had finally stopped living as someone else's background noise. Thank you so much for listening to Grace's story. It was a journey of finding strength in silence and learning that sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away. I would love to know where you are tuning in from today. Are you listening while driving, cooking, or maybe relaxing in your own quiet corner of the world? Let me know in the comments below. I love reading your stories. If you enjoyed this story, please consider subscribing to Kate Revenge Stories, hitting that like button, and smashing the hype button. Your support helps these stories reach more people and keeps the channel growing. See you in the next video.